There we go. All right. Hello, everyone. It's Friday, which means I am here, Becky Schnexer. I'm a lower school science teacher. I teach kindergarten through fifth grade science in Virginia Beach, Virginia. We have a new time this Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Although I know you're used to being here at 4 p.m. It's totally fine. We're going to work with it, right? This whole situation that we're in the world right now is all about flexibility and making things work when we have these little hiccups happen. So hello, everyone. I am so excited to be joined by one of my special friends, Carly, and she's going to be talking about multilingual strategies for every classroom. This is so different from anything else that we've done on the show so far. So I am so excited. And for those just tuning in, or for those who have been here since I started this little show, it started because of the COVID-19 situation, right? We were all thrust into this new world of education. We were thrown online and we had to make of it what we will. And then the emails started pouring in, all these resources, and here's this awesome thing to try, and here's a free trial of this, which were all well-intentioned, and they were awesome. Great to see. At the same time, a little bit overwhelming. So this series was just meant to be educators, by educators, for educators, and little snippets of strategies or activities that we can turn around and use in our classroom tomorrow. Or since it's Friday, we could use it in our classroom on Monday or a few days after that. So thank you guys for being here. And I'm going to let Carly introduce herself and take it away. So Carly, off you go.
All right. Hello, everyone. I am Carly Spina, and I'm so excited to be with Becky today. And I have to tell you guys, so you all know Becky. This is Becky's show. I first met Becky at the Teach Better conference back in November. And I have to tell you, so Becky and I have we talked a few times on Twitter and stuff, and we were on the same kind of chats, and we participated on it together. But when I met Becky face to face, she is one of those girls who are just they're gonna say, hey, you're Carly, right? And I said, yeah. And she's like, hey, let's go grab a table. Let's go sit down. And so she's like one of those people that just like makes you feel like a best friend instantly. So love you, Becky. So glad to know you. And I'm so glad to be on the show today. So my background in education is serving linguistically diverse students, families, and communities. I have taught ESL for 5 years at like third, fourth, and fifth grade level, so an intermediate level. So I did that for 5 years. And then after that, I switched over to a third grade bilingual program. So I was a third grade classroom teacher within a transitional bilingual program. So we had part of our day in English and part of the day in Spanish, but we were still teaching all the same grade level standards, content standards that everybody else was doing. We were doing it in 2 languages because we were really wonderful and bilingual. And then right now I am in my 3rd year, I'm finishing up my 3rd year as district EL bilingual instructional coach. So it's a long title, but basically it just means that I'm the luckiest girl in the district. I get to touch everybody. I get to work with everybody. I work with teachers. I work with administrators. I sometimes get to work with students. I work with our parents and our larger community. So I love what I do. I'm really excited to be a part of the multilingual team in my district. I live in the Chicago suburbs. So I serve Glenview District 34. But I'm so excited to share with you guys a few things that all of us can do to support our multilingual learners and families. So Becky, I know like I have kind of been guilty of saying something as an educator, and even prior to being an educator, I always used to say, I'm not a science person, or I'm not a math person. And Becky, does that get under your skin when people say that?
It does, but you know what? I take it as a challenge. I'm like, oh, but you are. Let me show you.
Yes.
So yeah, it does. And I catch myself saying things like, well, I'm just a teacher. And I'm like, oh my gosh, but you're so much more. So we're all so guilty of those, like putting ourselves in boxes. But I mean, once the doors opened or once the windows opened and you realize, oh my gosh, I can fly, you're like, oh, I am. I'm all of these things. I just didn't see it, or I just didn't notice it. So
Yes,
yeah.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. So sometimes when I'm out and about at conferences or I'm meeting folks who are not in an ESL or a bilingual or a dual language setting, they'll say, oh, that's not my thing. I don't know those things because I'm not bilingual. I'm not multilingual. And so the good news is, again, all of us are teachers of language because we all teach our content through language. So really, every one of us is a language teacher, even if we're monolingual. So that's like the good news is all of us can take it and step into those shoes and say, yeah, I can do this too. So I am going to share some things today about ways that all of us can support our multilingual students without even getting, your ESL certification or endorsement or anything like that. So number one, as I'm going to say, everybody in education is an advocate. Everybody has that opportunity to step into that role of a change agent and look at your system and analyze your system and think about equity and think about when we talk about achievement gaps, are they really achievement gaps or are they opportunity gaps? Is everybody getting that same opportunity? And then we can think about things like service delivery. There are so many different service models for serving multilingual learners. Some of it is an ESL classroom where kids are pulled out of their grade level, they're pulled out of their homeroom, and they're given opportunities to engage in language development exercises. And then we have the full other end of the spectrum where it is inclusive, it is co-taught classrooms, maximizing the expertise of a classroom teacher or a content teacher and the specialist of the ESL teacher, the EL teacher. So that's number one, is everybody is an advocate. Even if you don't have the full background, you can still step into that space and look through that critical lens of how we're serving our students. So in addition to kind of stepping into that space, we can talk a little bit about this idea of beyond visuals. So right now I'm working on a book and it's tentatively titled Beyond Visuals. So I go to conferences and I always check out the vendor booths and I always, walk through and see what's out there for students. And what's interesting is you'll be walking and like everyone's got their like booth set up and their big like posters and stuff. And so there's always like a bubble on someone's poster, and it happens every time I go, every time, no matter what the conference is. And it'll say, this program also works for language learners. It also works for language learners. And so for some of us in the field, we're like, what do you mean it also works? If it's good for kids, it should be good for all kids, right? So, you kind of stop and you pause and you might say, oh, okay, I do have a large number of language learners. Let me go and see what they're all about. Let me go see what this product or this service or this resource is all about. So you go up to the publisher booth and they'll say, yeah, we have the answer. We've got the secret sauce. We have what you need as a teacher to reach your language learners. And so, we all gather in and we pull up buddies who are passing by, walking through the booths with us, and we all lean in and they're like, you see here, we've got the teacher manual right here. And it lists out all the materials that you're going to need. It lists out all the steps that you're going to have for this lesson. And then, here's how you teach it to everybody. But then here's how you teach it to your language learners. And there's like a little ugly box at like the bottom of the page. And it's like gray and it's like teeny tiny. And so you lean in real close to see what it says. And it says, add visuals. And every time I see it,
that's how you reach all learners. Add visuals.
Add visuals. And so while visuals are a wonderful way to increase comprehensible input for students, that's not the only thing that we can do. So that's one of my, biggest like, okay, what else? How can we move beyond just adding a visual and saying, yep, check the box. I am doing my kids a service now. I am being more, I'm creating more accessible content for my students. So that's really one of the things, like that's the whole premise of my book is what other ways can we move beyond? So one other thing that I would say about, okay, now we want to be change agents, we want to move beyond visuals. We need to know our students' language profiles. We need to know what their language skills are in their home language or heritage language. And then we also need to know, okay, what is their proficiency level right now? So I'm in Illinois, I'm in a WIDA state. I think there's 39 other states that are part of the WIDA consortium. So there's a lot of great information for us, like tools that we can use that say, okay, if a student is at this proficiency level, this would be a good scaffold or resource or a good instructional strategy that we should do to support our students. But if we don't even know our students' language proficiency levels, like we've got to get on that. We got to own that information and say, all right, someone's got to hook me up with this. Someone's got to give me this information. That might be your EL teacher, that might be your school psych, that might be your administration, depending on who is servicing students in your school. But we have to know our students' language profiles. And then not only that, when I was an EL teacher, I was so guilty of just saying, here is a score, off you go, classroom teacher. And so they'd say, okay, thanks. But like, what does it mean? So it's really important that we sit down and have those collaborative conversations about, okay, so if a student is at a 2.3 in reading, what does that actually mean for your practice? And then the other thing is, as students are exiting EL programs, so each state kind of has their different criteria for how they can exit a program or graduate EL. That's a very commonly heard term or phrase. We have to also keep in mind that even when students exit the program, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are proficient in every domain of language on that given assessment. So the 4 domains of language: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So if students are exiting just because of a global average of all 4 of those domains, that doesn't give us information about how the students are reading. It doesn't give us information about how the students are writing. And if they still need scaffolds to be able to access the grade level content and vocabulary that's needed. So I think a lot of times students who kind of reach that proficiency level that whatever state deems necessary, the kids are kind of left on their own. And people say, oh, you know what? They're good. They're proficient. They're all set. We don't have to worry about that anymore. But language development takes time. It's a lifelong journey. And so many of us are, all of us are truly language learners. My daughter, she's 8 years old. And this week, she's been working really hard on keeping our floor swept. But I love the term that she uses. She says, I'm brooming, because she's using a broom. I love that. I'm brooming, Mom. And I'm like, oh, you're brooming. I see that you're sweeping. So I'm honoring her language. I'm honoring the word choice that she made. And I'm also supplying the word sweeping. So I'm not correcting her and saying, oh, Chloe, you're wrong. That's not how you say it. I'm saying, oh, I noticed you said this. Also this. So it's a compliment to her language skills. So we talked about the 4 domains of language. It's important for us to know that they're all interconnected. So no matter what we teach, if we teach science or music or math, anytime that we can involve all 4 domains of language in our lesson, the better. Everyone's going to benefit. If kids have the ability and the time and the space to speak and interact with each other using language around that content area, everybody is going to be able to have success in navigating that academic language for that content area. So I would say to everybody watching, make sure you are looking at your lesson plans as how do I include all 4 domains of language? And that's just one simple thing all of us can do. And it doesn't have to be like I have to dedicate 5 minutes to reading and 5 minutes to writing and 5 minutes to listening, 5 to speaking. It just make sure you're hitting all 4. And so that's a really easy way. Again, you don't need to have an EL endorsement to do it, but you're giving all students that opportunity to engage authentically around a learning experience, around your content area with language.
I love that. And it's not just this is what we do for English language learners or students who are in a special program. Like these are strategies that make sense for all learners. So there's no harm, so to speak, in using them in any lesson plan. In fact, it makes it stronger. I love that. I love that you pointed that out.
So we always say it's good, it's best practice for all, it's good for all, but it's necessary for our multilingual learners.
I love that.
So I'll share one other thing. My other thing I'm going to share is establishing language norms. So this is kind of, this is an opportunity for all of us to kind of embrace our role as a change agent and identify language norms when we are collaborating with our teammates, our colleagues around the table or virtually. So a lot of times at the beginning of meetings, people will say, okay, you know, guys, as we're meeting today, we're going to really make sure that we stick to our time. We're going to honor everybody's time. We're going to start and end on time. And we're going to assume positive intent, right? Like those are some of the common norms. I would challenge all of us to say, okay, those are our norms for collaboration. We're also going to introduce some language norms, how we around the table engage with language when we're describing our students or when we're describing our families. WIDA is a consortium that always talks so much about asset-based thinking and having an asset-based lens versus having a deficit-based lens. And there's so many times where folks will say around the table, and again, assuming positive intent, they may say things like, that student is low in both languages, or that family is not involved, or there's no support at home. So we have to really call each other out. And we might even say, you know, here's a phrase I've heard before, or here's a phrase I heard in a different setting. Instead of using this phrase, we're going to try this phrase instead because it's more inclusive and it reflects an asset-based lens. So for example, guys, I've heard this phrase before in the teacher's lounge. Maybe it's that phrase of the student is low in both languages. So we're not going to say that today. We're really going to hold ourselves to a higher standard. And we're going to say this student is developing in 2 languages. And that's the language choice we need to make. So again, it's kind of identifying what are possible deficit lens perspectives that we have. And it's calling it out. And it's saying all of us around the table, everybody at the table, we all have to make that commitment to kind of use our language carefully, because the language we use about students reflects our beliefs about students. And in turn, it reflects how we instruct our students. So holding language norms, that's something that all of us can try in our settings.
That's awesome. I love that lens. So you talked about some amazing things today from the perspective of you're the instructor, you're the educator charged with serving your classroom, but also now you're a colleague and you're a part of a team. And looking at those language norms, I love that you kind of switch it around. You say, well, we have to hold these standards here and these standards here for the dual role that you serve as an educator. And I love that. That definitely gives us a lot to think about and a lot to kind of bring to the forefront of our planning process and our professionalism, because that to me is what it comes down to, is how are you conducting yourself as a professional? It's so incredibly important. That's amazing. I am so excited for your book. I can't wait. I'm going to be like your biggest fangirl. I'm going to be your hype girl. As soon as that hits pre-order, I'm going to be like, yep. And I'm going to put it all over social media because you're amazing. You're an amazing person. And I love especially this lens of multilingual strategies is so incredibly important. And I also, there's so much I love. You're going to hear me say, oh my gosh, I love this, because I do, I love it all. But I also loved when you were saying that they're good strategies, they're best practices for all, but they're necessary for some. And that hit me right here and right here. And I love that. It's an amazing phrase. It's an amazing thing. Like, I feel like whatever lesson plan system you use, whether it's online, and I'm old school, I really like to write it out just to get it stuck here and stuck in my heart as I'm educating. But I feel like that's a quote that you need right on the top of every single day. I love that. That's a great thing to keep in the forefront of our mind. So Carly, thank you so much. That was amazing. I feel like I need to go and I need to journal for myself, things not to forget as I go back and I start planning for learning again. or planning to meet with colleagues. This has been fantastic. Do you have any final parting thoughts that you would love our audience to hear?
Well, Becky, I just have to say thank you so, so much. I'm so excited for your book. Again, like you're going to be hyping mine. I'm going to be hyping yours like crazy. I'm so excited to learn from all of your amazing adventures in science with kids. But my final message to everybody watching would just be that all learners are language learners. Everybody's developing in language. So if we're all thinking through that lens of language and linguistic supports, then everybody benefits.
I love that. Thank you again, Carly. You are a rock star, and I can't wait to have our dual fangirling going on over our books. It's going to be so fantastic. So,
thank you.